Hello, friends, and welcome back to the only show on YouTube that dares to tell you that reading is still fundamental. Hi, friends. Welcome back to show Have I Told You About This? Episode 28. I am still, after 28 episodes, your host, Brad Komjenik. They have not thrown me off the show yet. Crazy. This is the show where my mind takes me places during the week, and then I take you along with me. This week, my mind was taking a break from all the video games, all the music, and all the hubbub. And I took some time to take in some of the best fantasy as well as a real world account of one of the most horrific historic events that I've lived through in my lifetime in book form. And now I'll be sharing those with you. As always, I'd like to start by thanking everyone who's watched, liked, and subscribed to the show. Without you, there's no show. There's just me talking here to no one. So thank you so much for all of your help in getting the show noticed. The only way I can be noticed, the only way that algorithm will ever even bother to look at me is if you like, subscribe, and comment. So I hope you'll keep those going. You know, we're really closing in on 30 episodes, and I couldn't have done it without you. So thank you again so much. All right. So now, get comfortable and let's have some lively discussion about two books that I spent this whole last week reading absolutely through. And they're big, thick, chunky books, and a lot of people don't believe I actually read that much, but I did. The first book is called Alchemized by Sin Lin Yu. That's all one word you'll see on the cover. And the second book is Challenger. It's by Adam Higginbotham. So let's get started, shall we? I will tell you this week about the books Alchemized and Challenger. So let's start with Alchemized. We give you a little plot synopsis. Alchemized is a dark fantasy and gothic horror epic, I would call it, set in the alchemically advanced city state of Palladia. It's a nation that's been shattered by brutal civil war, and it's ruled by the undead necromantic regime known as the Undying. The story follows Helena Marino, a former healer and alchemist herself, whose memories are no longer there for her. And of course, that's a problem. Now, this isn't your typical, oh, this person doesn't know who they are and, blah, blah, blah. No, no. She knows who she is. But her memories of the past and how she got where she is seemed hidden. It's like she knows them, but she can't quite put her finger on them. The novel unfolds across three interwoven timelines, too, which is kind of unique. You have the present, which they call post war. There's the middle, which is during the war. And then there's the past, which is her childhood memories, which she very much still has. And all of these collide and overlap to reveal the truth behind Helena's transformation and this resistance final weapon and the moral cost of simply surviving in the world. So, as far as Palladia goes, Palladia was a once powerful industrial city state where alchemy governs warfare, medicine, industry, and political power. So, those who control alchemy control those things. There is religious rule. It's called the Order of the Eternal Flame. And then there's the Principate. And they once controlled society, but don't any longer. There are industrial guilds, and they rose in influence as alchemy and alchemical practice and alchemical technology advanced. And then you have this necromancy. It's long been forbidden, right? That's actually raising, in case you don't know or never heard the word, it's raising the dead back to life to use for your own purposes, right? They follow what you tell them. It's long been forbidden, but it was weaponized by a character named Moro. And Moro offered immortality and raised the dead to build an unstoppable army. Then you have what's called the Fall. Moro exploited political unrest and he toppled the theocracy and he installed the undying and immortal necromantic regime, and the resistance was crushed. Necromancy became law, and Palladia became a surveillance state built on fear and torture and resurrection as punishment. Now, let's talk a little bit about the main characters. Again, you have Helena Moreno, your main protagonist. She's a former healer and an alchemist and covert operative of the Eternal Flame Resistance. She awakens from what was called a cryostasis with no memory of just the last year of the war. Okay. That's really, really important. Again, this isn't oh, I don't know who I am. I need to find out who I am, how I got here, or everything else. She knows a lot about what's going on. But somehow or another, the past year has been wiped clean. That plays a huge part in the story. Her mind had been alchemically transmuted, its pathways rerouted and sealed. How that happens, I won't spoil. But that'll be for you to read. But it's incredibly intriguing and it makes sense, right? So many fantasy novels for me go just a little bit too far fantasy. I mean, let's think about the Lord of the Rings an example, not like what I'm talking about there. The Lord of the Rings world makes sense. There are armies, there's a bad guy. They don't have crazy technology. Of course, yes, there's magic and it's why it's called fantasy. Okay, magic, you understand. But when things get like just a little bit too crazy, right? Or things get invented at the last minute because the author wrote themselves into a corner, I don't like that. Luckily, that does not happen here in this book. And Helena also holds a secret that the resistance died to protect. And I won't tell you what that is either. When you find out, it's going to make all the world of sense, and then the plot really kicks in. So keep that in mind as you go on through the book. There's another character, uh, Kane Farron, um, who is an antagonist who turns ally. He's called the High Reeve of the Undying. He's heir to a powerful industrial guild. And he starts off as Helena's captor, even interrogator, but later, an uneasy ally. Torn between duty to the regime and his conscience. Their relationship is fraught with coercion and trauma and reluctant trust between each other, and it's just cool, right? Look, I'm not a romantasy reader, okay? I'm not really big in that. I mean, I was all fine with Lord of the Rings with Aragorn and um, the lady elf and them having their romance and things like that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with romance, right? But I'm not going to read a novel for romance. I mean, there's another whole section over at Barnes and Noble called romance, and I go read that all day long. And fantasy's fantasy, and of course, I mean, look, you got Han Solo and Princess Leia. That's about as deep as I want it in my fantasy and science fiction, right? Uh, I don't need to see two people passionately falling in love while dragons are flying around. It's just not my game, and that's not what this book is about either. Then, of course, you have the High Necromancer Morrow, as we talked about. He is the architect of the Undying regime. He's ruthless. He's brilliant. He's obsessed with Lena's altered mind, and he loves to execute people and then immediately resurrect him and make him his lackey. and he's seeking to replicate the Resistance's animancy to cement eternal control. And there are a few other characters that you're also going to run into in the book that are considered key, right? You have Luke Holdfast, Helena's lover and resistance commander. There's Aurelia Farron, Kane's unstable wife. There's Stroud, who's a cruel, what's called vivimancer. He's fascinated by Helena's brain and trying to figure out what's going on there. There's Lila Bayard, who's a resistance ally. And then there's Shiso, Enid, Rose Farron, Paul Bayard. These are all just additional figures who help shape the political and emotional landscapes. So, real quickly, in kind of a plot breakdown, if you will, Helena awakens after years in something called cryostasis, and she's frail and disoriented and kind of surrounded by these vivimancers who expected her to be dead. They thought they were just studying a dead corpse, when it turns out she's very much alive. And again, they discovered her mind had been transmuted by some unknown alchemical process, and her memories are sealed behind some alchemical barrier that no one can break. And she may hold the key to the resistance technique capable of restoring the undead souls back to their original body. She's tortured, she's probed, and she's interrogated, and you feel so horrible for her. Morrow personally just inspects her and realizes that she's hiding something monumental, and he does some bad things to try to coax her into working with him. Then she gets transferred to a place called Spire Fall, which is the decaying manor of Kane Farron, who becomes her new interrogator. Kane's cold, clinical, and terrifying, but unlike Morrow, he's not cruel. Then we hit part two, which is the actual war, the middle timeline. And things happen to Helena. We see the war unfold. We find out Helena was a gifted healer and uh, deep into the resistance. And she and Luke Holdfast led desperate efforts to counter the necromancy. The resistance developed animancy, a technique that could restore the souls and undo the necromancy that had been done. And Helena volunteered to have her mind altered to hide that technique. But everyone was against it and said no. So, how did it happen? Why did it happen? That's for you to read. And the resistance last stand failed, and Helena was captured and then placed in stasis. And then part three is the revelation and the resistance and a return to present. And I'm not even going to come close to telling you anything about that because that's where everything gets revealed. So, for themes in this book, you've got memory and identity. Who are we without our memories, right? So, you see our main character struggle with that in such a way that you feel such empathy for her. And of course, there's power and control. Necromancy is political dom- domination, really. Morrow is horrific and killing people and then bringing them back. I mean, ugh, crazy. And yes, there's love and guilt and redemption. There's trauma bonded relationships during wartime, which are pretty common. You have ethics and creation, the morality of this alchemancy, vivimancy, and necromancy, as well as resurrection, and then truth and narrative. Who controls history after a war? Well, it's always the victor, isn't it? Or is it? That'll be for you to find out. So, how about the popularity and reception for this book, right? Well, it reached number one on the New York Times bestseller list the week after its release. It was widely described as being a dark fantasy, and some said gothic romance, but like I said, some of that's in here, but not not enough to make it sickly sweet, if you will. Yeah, there's horror. There's horror in this book. When you find out that these undead are what they're capable of, yeah, it's you know, if you watch The Walking Dead, right, and you find out that the the humans were the Walking Dead, it wasn't the zombies, and really the zombies were just fodder. They were the things to be killed each week. The thing you really had to deal with were the people. And you find out in this book, even though these undead are horrific, it's mostly the people that you have to watch out for. This book was noted for its emotional intensity and complex structure and exploration of trauma. Now, it was published by Del Rey, and it was published in September 23rd of 2025. It's 1,040 pages. Yeah, that's a lot, but I can read a lot in a week. Look, as I said, I'm a psychologist. If you would have seen the amount of books I had to read for college and I'd get through, crazy. So the author is listed as you see there. It's all one word, Sin Lin Yu, but it's an American author. Pretty sure that's probably not their name. Alchemized is their debut original novel, and it's a reimagining of their massively popular fan fiction that they originally wrote called Manacled, and it blended basic Harry Potter wizardry with The Handmaid's Tale. And so he took Manacled, and it got really, really popular as fan fiction from both that Harry Potter and The Handmaid's Tale uh, group of fans. And Del Rey said, "Why don't you write this novel? Make it a novel." And he did, or they did. I don't know if Sin Yung Lu is a man or woman. So they did. Get my pronouns correct. That's important. Sequels or prequels? Alchemized is officially described as going to just be a standalone novel. And at 1,040 pages, I'm good with that. There is no direct sequel or prequel that has been announced. However, the author does have a 2-book deal. So that suggests another book is coming from them, but it's not been confirmed if it'll be in the same world or not. So, that in a nutshell is Alchemized. What I can tell you is this story starts sad. You feel for Helen, and then it gets worse, and then it gets a little more worse. And just about the time you feel like, man, I just got it's just too much. That's when you hit the second. The author just takes you to the brink and then says, "All right, here's some relief. Let's go into a different part." And they take you to a different part. And then you learn more about the characters and where they come from and how did we get to where we were at that point. And you go back to a lot of those childhood memories and things and how we got here. And then you get taken to the third act, which is the finale. And friends, from there, strap in, put your seatbelt on, hands and arms inside the ride vehicle at all times because it just takes off from there. And I had such a hard time putting this book down when I got to the third part. It's really what drove me. I'm gonna be honest, I almost stopped in the about three-fourths of the way through the first section because it was just too much. It got to be a lot there in the first section. But I'm glad I stuck in there because this really was one of the most enjoyable fantasy books that I've read so far this year. I know this year's pretty young, and I've got many, many more lined up to go. So can't say it's my favorite book, but what I can tell you is so far I've not had a fantasy book this year that really took hold of me the way Alchemized did. So hopefully you'll give this a shot and let me know what you think about it. Uh, Hit me up again as always down in the comments. Let me know. Does it sound intriguing to you? Of course, I've had some people say, "Well, isn't that alchemy like like the you know, Mistborn or whatever it is?" And I'm like, no, 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 that was metallurgy, right? Where they ingested metals, and that gave them their powers. Um, Alchemy is more, think of it more Harry Potter magic, right? But it's more potions and things like that. It's not so much magic wandery, if you will. So if that's up your alley, and as well as kind of gothic horror, kind of mixed, you know, the best thing that I can say is the middle, that first part is almost like the last couple movies of Harry Potter, just really dark and everything, but then it lightens up. It's almost like the beginning of Harry Potter in the middle, and at the end, it's like the best parts of all the Harry Potter movies put together. So hopefully that'll sell you. Hopefully you'll be at least maybe heading over to your library and seeing if you can't put this one on the list for free if you can't afford your own copy. Alrighty, let's move on to our second novel, Challenger by Adam Higginbotham. Friends, I was very much alive when the Challenger space shuttle blew up. I was at school, and they rolled televisions in to our gym, pulled us all into the gym, and we were watching it go off, and we all were filled with hope as it was going up, because there was a teacher on that space shuttle, Krista McAuliffe, and of course all the teachers were proud. Um, and then it blew up on television, and of course they all died instantly, and all of us kids went home in shock. And this book is a narrative nonfiction reconstruction of the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. And it literally blends minute by minute reporting of and archival research and biographical storytelling to reveal what the technical failures were, what the political pressures were at the time, and organizational dysfunction at NASA, and all of the human stories that led to the tragedy. You know, although it's nonfiction, it is structured like a dramatic historical epic in a way. Higginbotham weaves together multiple timelines and crew biographies and NASA program history in the final hours before that launch. In the prologue titled "The Shadow of Apollo 1," the book opens with the 1967 Apollo 1 fire, where three astronauts died during a ground test. And Higginbotham actually uses that as a thematic and historical anchor. You see, NASA had already experienced previously back then in 67 a preventable tragedy. It did not have to happen, but it did. The warning signs were present back then, and they were ignored, they were minimized, and misunderstood. And the culture of go fever, go at all costs, no matter what, and political pressure had began decades earlier. And that set up the central thesis of the book. Challenger was not an isolated accident, but the culmination of whole systemic issues, not just with NASA, but even in our government. Then you have the birth of the space shuttle program. Higginbotham traces the shuttle's origins in the 70s. The shuttle was designed to be reusable, like earlier spacecraft. NASA envisioned frequent, routine spaceflight, almost like a space truck for science and defense and commercial use. Political and budgetary pressures, though, forced compromises in the shuttle's designs and materials and safety margins. Friends, once again, cutting corners, and I don't care in what you're doing. I don't care if you're playing a board game, cutting corners, cheating, not doing what you're supposed to, it never pays. And the shuttle became a symbol of American technological optimism, but also a victim of political expectations. Then you have the rise of organizational dysfunction. The narrative details how NASA's internal culture shifted. Safety concerns were increasingly overridden by schedule pressure. NASA leadership sought to maintain public confidence and political support at the same time. In order to do that, you hit your dates no matter what. Then you have contractors like Morton Theacle who faced conflicting incentives, engineering caution versus corporate government pressure. This section introduces the O-ring problem, the critical technical flaw that would doom the Challenger. Then we go into the crew and humanizing the 7 astronauts. Higginbotham actually devotes significant narrative space to the lives of the crew. You had Francis Dick Scobie, the commander, Michael J. Smith, the pilot, Ronald McNair, a mission specialist, Ellison Onizuka, a mission specialist, Judith Resnick, another mission specialist, Gregory Jarvis was your payload specialist, and of course, Krista McCullough, who was a teacher in space, just as a participant. Higginbotham explores each and every one of their childhoods and their training and their motivations, their family lives, and even their personal dreams. And this humanization is central to this book's emotional impact. And I can tell you, there is a huge emotional impact in this book. I know exactly where I was when this happened. I know how I felt then, and I felt it all over again. And it only made it hurt even worse to learn much, much more about these people who were on that shuttle and about how this all did never, ever had to happen. Higginbotham then goes over the final days before launch. Engineers at Morton Thiokol warned that the O-rings could fail if the temperatures got cold enough. The forecast predicted unusually cold weather at Cape Canaveral for launch day. NASA managers, under pressure to maintain their schedule, went ahead and pushed for the launch. The engineers protested, but their concerns were overridden after a contentious teleconference. In other words, the political regime said, "We don't care. Put it in the air." This section reads like a thriller. It's political pressure, bureaucratic inertia, and ignored warnings. They all converge. Then he goes over launch day, January 28th, 1986. Millions of Americans watched live, including school children, excited to see teacher Krista McCullough go to space. It was exactly 73 seconds after liftoff. You see a plume of flame escape from the right solid rocket booster. The O-ring had given way. It failed due to the cold temperatures, just as the engineers said it would. That external tank ruptured, and like a bomb, blew everything to bits. The shuttle broke apart over the Atlantic Ocean. All 7 crew members were killed. Then Higginbotham goes over the aftermath, investigation, and cover ups. Higginbotham details the Rogers Commission investigation. Whistleblowers and leakers exposed internal NASA documents. Engineers testified about ignored warnings. NASA's culture of go fever was publicly condemned, and the shuttle program then was grounded for years. The book argues that the disaster was the result of political cynicism, cost cutting, and systematic hubris. And finally, you have the legacy of the disaster. The Challenger disaster became a defining moment in American history. It became a symbol of lost national innocence, and it became a catalyst for reform in NASA's safety culture. Thank God. Higginbotham closes by reflecting on the human cost and the enduring lessons that this disaster played not only on the crew member and their family, but on a nation. So, Challenger, the book, was a major, major critical success. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was the winner of National Book Critics Circle Award for nonfiction. It was the winner of the Kirkus Nonfiction Prize. It was shortlisted for the Andrew Carnegie Medal. It was named Notable Book of the Year 2024. Reviewers have called it stunning, a heart-pounding thriller, devastating, a universal story, and dramatic. and moving. The full title, of course, is Challenger, a true story of heroism and disaster on the edge of space. As mentioned, the author was Adam Higginbotham. Publisher was Avid Reader Press and Simon and Schuster. It was published on May 14th of 2024 and 576 pages. Higginbotham is a well-known British journalist. He's contributed to the New Yorker, Wired Magazine, and the New York Times. He's also an author of the book Midnight in Chernobyl, another award-winning nonfiction thriller, which, because I love this book so much, I'll also be picking up a little later. Friends, I can't tell you how just absolutely sad this book made me over the week. I mean, of course, when you live through something like this in person, I'm sure the when JFK was assassinated and people saw that, I can imagine that you kind of feel the same way. I mean, no one was quote unquote assassinated here, but this clearly didn't have to happen. Of course, none of us knew that at the time. It'd be years later before we would find out the real reasons. Um, but boy, it sure shook our space travel for a long, long time. It shook NASA, changed NASA completely, as it should, right? Um, we've had other companies that just made really, really bad decisions and hurt a lot of people and paid the price. It's not, of course, it's not just companies, but in these cases, I mean, the government was even involved, because we have to look like we are the winners of everything, the first in space or whatever, and our, go 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 USA. Sometimes look, of course, love the United States of America, proud to be an American, but sometimes when you have government, you have people, and people are flawed, and sometimes money, prestige, power, and just sometimes our overall standing in the world seems to take precedence over people. And that's what this book really, really drives home in the point. So if you're in the mood, for just utter sadness, because that's what this book is about, but also there's a lot of great journalism in here that teaches you a lot about what happened. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, you're not going to find a better book on this than Challenger. So let me know what you think. Were you around when this happened? Are you? I mean, um, you'd have to be kind of older like me, I guess, to be around by back then, '86. Um, if not, let's say you're young. Did you know about Challenger? Or were you curious about it? What happened or anything? If you are, I mean, I can only just highly recommend this book. If you like, 'Cause I recommend it to anybody because it's a wonderful treatise on um, human um, the ability of humans to put other humans last, right? Um, no matter the cost. And I wish we didn't have that trait about us. Of course we do. It's nothing new under the sun, folks. It's been here since day one. It'll be here when the last day comes. So that'll never change. But in this case, very very sad, but also very informative book. And I hope you'll give it a read. Let me know down in the comments if you're interested at all, and or if you've got any stories about if you want to share your story of where you were when this happened as well. I'd love to hear that as well. Um, Not a lot of people talk about this Challenger disaster, so it's something that I think could use some good discussion. All right, friends, that's episode 28. And now I've told you about Alchemized and Challenger, two great books. And I hope you'll spend some time because, like I mentioned, reading is still fundamental. Although now we kind of do it on Kindles and our computers and our phones, and that's okay. Wherever you read, just read. right? Let your imagination go for a little while. Don't keep it crammed up or bottled up or let everybody else tell you about everything else. Go find out things on your own. Learn a little bit. You might be amazed where your imagination can take you. I know I am. My mind takes me so many places every week. I've got to come here and tell you about it twice a week. So thanks for joining me again, friends. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. And I hope you'll join me back for episode 29 coming up soon. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you back here real soon. Don't forget also, like, subscribe, and comment so I can hear from you because I always love to. Take care.